trying to make either things that you guys are not exposed to from your world, or maybe new perspectives on things that you haven't thought of yet. So it won't be that much about the actual creation of a PDF or organizing it or anything. It's going to be more like, how do you turn that into knowledge and action that benefits the humans out there? And it's going to be a bunch of different parts, so if you're bored, it'll change pretty fast. It is longer than 20 minutes though, so get a beer, a full one if you don't have one. Yes! Yeah, do a round, then I won't feel like I have to rush. And if you guys may stump me in Q&A, in which case we'll just go group discussion format. There's going to be stuff that I will have no clue about. Yeah, I'm a marine biologist. I study how corals have babies, how they spawn, how their babies swim, what they're searching for. How do they do that? A lot of corals are hermaphrodites, and they spawn buns and eggs and sperm that have to meet bundles from a different parent.
Does that just happen by washing them out?
A lot of them float. So I use those when I do experiments to figure out what they're smelling for, what species they like. And then if we can actually raise them and put them back underwater, can we do that effectively enough that it actually makes a difference? What's the only a small part of what I do?
It's just a small little box with cable.
Mostly it's about making sure the ocean is still safe for them and not trying to actually plant them out ourselves. But there's a little bit of, more and more it's actually becoming something that's practical on a small scale. Especially for the really rare species. You can raise 20 and get them on the water, and you didn't have that many in decades. I'm going to be burping for the first 5 minutes of my talk.
You tell me.
What is your name? Kevin? What do you do? Got it. You're asking good questions. Very, very good science questions.
I've already done that.
How good is it at Mendeley?
I've already done that. Where did the apple come in?
I take full responsibility.
And you have to buy a load of other journals.
I'm glad you guys appreciate it.
You're doing pictures of 10 girls. The jokes would never end. I'm a little jealous I'm missing all the other ones. I've gotten some good ones so far. Oh my goodness. Quiet pause. How many of these have you guys done so far?
You were the third one, so yeah. So, but the first one speaker that we've had, so very pleased about that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Is it the first American?
Yes, as well.
I guess I should also warn you guys before they start recording me. I have been living in the Caribbean with a Dutch boyfriend and colleagues that speak Papiamentu and students that speak Spanish. And my accent is shaking this weird root through space and time. So if you're like, she kind of sounds funny for an American, I don't really speak English with Americans anymore. So
Most Americans do sound funny.
Okay, I probably sound totally the same to you guys. I've had people in Curacao, I've had Americans ask me, like, where are you from? Oh gosh, same place you are. It's embarrassing. So I don't actually know where my accent is.
If some people don't mind moving a little bit forward, just because then the room just looks slightly better for like pictures.
So you have to be.
You are like
Posing for PR.
I would volunteer to go more, but
afterwards, so
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just under a meg of upload, so.
Satisfied.
Perfect. Awesome. Let's get started then. Do you want to say anything? Yeah, no pressure.
And tough questions and all of that. So Kristen is I think you're pretty much Superwoman, aren't you? So he's like scuba diver, researcher, and TED Senior Fellow now. Senior Fellow. And she's going to be doing like a TED Talk after this one. So this is like a warm-up for her big TED Talk, which they've been drilling her for. So again, high expectations on the performance
This one's
here.
going to be better.
Yeah, well,
Actually,
exactly.
the
Of
other
course,
one is
yeah,
too short.
it's going to be much better. So basically, yes, we've got a treat on our hands, really, and thank you so much for coming all the way over from the Caribbean to experience the much better
My
weather
pleasure.
in London. I'm sure it's
Perfect.
soak it up.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you also, Alice. Alice also gets a big world of thanks for logistics and for the invitation. And I have to say, I'm actually more excited to do this talk than the one for TED about coral babies, because that one's only 5 minutes long and it's horrifying. This is going to be fun. With this amazing controller, there's just like forward and back and one jump button, and it was super, super hard because whenever you hit the button, it took about half a second before the man would jump. But I want you guys to feel how horrifying it really was to play it, how much, I don't know how nervous I was playing it. So Tom is going to demonstrate what this was really like in the 80s, playing this super sweet game.
This is good.
You guys are getting design ideas right now, I know it, you can tell.
oh, crocodiles.
Skills.
Dangerous, yeah.
Ooh.
Now that's going to be the funniest thing, the most exciting thing of the day. There's no way I can top that. It's also kind of a really beautiful example of how far we've come in computer science in 20, 30 years. So, who is this girl and why is she talking about 80s video games? Well, I live here on the island of Curacao, and I study coral reefs at this research station here in Carmabi, which is one of the oldest research stations in the Caribbean and is starting to become a center of some of the most prominent new research on coral reefs. My specific study system is oceans was told in this paper in 2001 by a professor of mine in grad school. And the story is that that's not even how bad it gets, because humans have been plundering the ocean since before Columbus, eating the sharks and the whales and the monk seals. And when we got to the big fish, that was already halfway to nothing. So this paper in Science created enough of a splash that they not only managed to get 1 day of press attention, no, the professor who wrote this said, no, we got 3 days of press attention. So there's 1 day of press, and then day 3 of press. And when I find this out, I'm thinking, okay, right, but what about day 4? You've just told this story about 500 years of biology that took you, it was a paper that took 5 years to produce, and we paid attention to it in the news for 3 days. And now on day 4, we've got this, and still this. So in marine conservation, we can never make enough noise in the public eye through the media to scale with how bad things are. If it takes you 3 days to do a paper and you get to talk about it in public for 1 day, we're never going to make enough noise to change things, to make enough of a scene, to make enough of a racket. So I spent a lot of time just, we keep using it, and we keep using it. So when we go buy a product, we don't look for the one that was necessarily the newest, we look for the one that's the most functional and that works the best, is the most reliable. So if you think about these two categories and where scientific information, where PDFs fit, they look just like the news, but they're not. They have all the characteristics of being a durable good, but we treat them like they're news. We search for, well, we organize and communicate it as if it's news that refreshes itself every day. I wrote about this in Wired UK last month, no, 2 months ago. And as a sign that I think this is a message that's worth repeating, somebody took a screenshot of the article and underlined my quote, "Across the landscape, we obsessively substitute the new for the important." The reason it's particularly interesting that this was tweeted is that Evan Williams is a co-founder of Twitter. And he saw that and thought, that's a good point. So the person who co-founded Twitter thinks that we are all too obsessed with the new and not enough interested in the important, then we're on to something here. And in fact, he is also one of the co-founders of Medium. So he's trying to get away from the obsession with new and the obsession with clickbait on the line. I'm clicking this twice every time I click it. Now, this isn't really anyone's fault because we're all professionally obligated to be obsessed with the new, to focus on the new. Scientists are always on to the next project. There's no press tour or book tour for a scientific article. PR offices are of course looking for what's new. Journals are looking for their new content, and so on and so on. We're obsessed with what's new to the point of absurdity in some cases. This report about the Caribbean's coral reefs is a summary of 42 years of data, basically every reliable scientific time series we have on Caribbean reefs. And it took the authors 3 years, I think, to put it all together. They issued it with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And then a large newspaper said, hey, we want you to write an op-ed about this. And a few weeks later, they said, well, here's our op-ed. And they said, oh, sorry, too late. This is already old. So it took 42 years to happen. It took 3 years to write. And a few weeks later, it was old news. No longer worthy of a spot on the op-ed page. An op-ed did end up being published eventually in the New York Times, but it wasn't easy to fight its way in. So this is a message I want the media and science journalists to think about and internalize more. Science and news shouldn't be something that ages. We shouldn't have a taboo about publishing or talking about science. The New York Times can't say, hey, look, this is still important the day after the scientists published it. On Twitter, they're saying, hey, remember this? This is still important. Hey, this is still important. This is still important. So somehow we've reached sort of like a speed limit in Twitter where nobody can publish stuff that fast to come up with a new tweet every 5 seconds, but that has created the space for people to start floating things back up to the surface when they think they're particularly important. Very fascinating that the citizens and the press agents and Twitter is becoming a better sort of, what would you say, kind of filter of importance than the front page of the newspaper. So there's 3 more pitfalls I'm going to talk about, and none of them are nearly as complicated to talk about. But in a similar way, there are aspects of the pitfalls that I think we're not recognizing or thinking about in the right way. One of them is bad translation. Small Atari man is now holding his PDF and a rope, trying to swing over this pit. I wish all these were animated. Someday. The PDF can also have its own noise. This is pretty scary. Just in December, there was a study that came out in Biomedical Journal that showed that a lot of health research is being exaggerated and hyped, not just in the media, but also in the original press release that comes out of the university office. This is pretty shocking and horrifying to me, because one of the only people in the world who's going to be the most and start scooping and shoveling a lot of the internet chatter around research all into one place. I love that. When I started talking about this stuff a few years ago, there wasn't altmetric. It was just like a big soup of commentary online and some press releases, and the average citizen couldn't look up a piece of literature and figure out what gravitas it had, what its real importance was. I will say, though, that one of the areas for opportunity with this is that right now a lot of the alt-metrics are still about counting up stuff. Let's just count tweets. Okay, cool. But if a scientific expert writes a tweet that says, this is complete crap, and it's shameful that this is published, or it's shameful that this connection is being drawn, that tweet is actually worth a lot more to society than a tweet that says, hey, look, there's a new paper on this thing. So I think there's a big opportunity here where people are already aggregating the conversation around a piece of literature. There's a big opportunity to look closer at the scientific consensus, the expert opinion, the expert curation that's happening around that research. And it would be amazing if there was a way to corral that all into that paper, so that the average mom or grandmother or president could take this tool itself is something that everyone should know about. It should be something that is on everybody's little search bar. Tell me more about this research in a language that makes sense to me. Okay, here's the one where we're all going to get mad, or at least one of us. Little man is now jumping over this digital fire. And this, I really don't know. I mean, it doesn't look like he's going to make it, right? It always, in this game, it never looks like he's going to make it. Nature, we want it all to be protected. But it's oftentimes the only way you get to the table to have the big conversation, that you let a lot of small conversations go. This article here was written by two former conservationists that then basically wrote this screed about how conservation wasn't getting anywhere because of this difference. I think there's an analogy to draw here with open access. There are papers that should be open access because society needs to know this stuff. It needs to be something we can shove in the face of a policymaker. To give you two examples, fisheries, food security, and the poor. Like we need to know what that says. Or cascading effects of overfishing marine systems. It's not just that access to this matters in developing countries and places with shitty internet. It also matters for people who work at NOAA in the government. It matters for people who graduate with a PhD and then go work for Oceana, doing marine conservation in Washington. It even matters for me because I work at a field station with no money and we don't have access to literature either. So I've got a huge pile of expertise in my brain, but I run into paywalls all the time and stuff that I really wish I could read. And yes, there's ways around it, but that's part of the training and becoming a scientist, is finding your way around that. Then this is a shocking thing that I just ran into in the course of preparing this talk. You might think, okay, but probably a lot of that is open access. Aggressively, there's also a new conservation journal, a journal called Conservation Physiology, and they just said, we're doing it all open access. There's no way we wouldn't. The other really cool thing about the new breed of journals is that now we're weighing import much less. We're letting good science go through, and we'll worry about importance. We'll compare that after the fact. So now we're seeing opportunities to publish small observations and case studies and anecdotes again. F1000 Research has an observation article format that they just started, and it's like 80% weird medical case studies and then 20% weird coral reef observations. Which is fantastic, because so often we see things once underwater. It took you a lifetime to see that once, and there's no way you're going to ever go study that topic or see it again, but you can drop your one little anecdote into the world, and that that's the spark for someone else. I just put this here as a coral interlude. This is bundles of coral eggs. And this is the sperm coming off of the bundles of eggs. They will eventually all come apart and then meet their friends in the laboratory later on. But this particular article is about the synchronization of coral spawning in the Red Sea. I'm very excited to see this. It means scientists in some way are saying we're not waiting for open access to become everywhere all the time. We're going to start chasing it ourselves for the stuff that matters. So an interesting thing then is what happens with the new Elsevier journal. Probably that's also going to start attracting a lot of stuff that scientists think should be open access. The same kinds of things, the policy-related topics, stuff that matters for nutrition and health and food security. But I don't think it's safe for us to just say like, all right, we did it, got there, we've got that business model covered. Because remember, we still have 95% of our conservation literature jammed behind paywalls. So I have a dream, I have a wish. What if the legacy publishers, what if all of the big publishing houses said, we realize there's stuff here that's really useful for people to be able to read. We're going to take half a weighing in on that subject, and he actually says, no, this is not an echo chamber. There's tons of science communication happening. But to raise the issue is useful. This isn't quite the echo chamber that's the pitfall nowadays. Our newest digital echo chamber is basically going from the closed-off scientific ivory tower where we were talking to ourselves in private. Then we went to talk to each other in private, but on the internet. And now we're doing it in digital science platforms. Now we've gone back to talking to just each other in digital science platforms. And now we're not talking to the public at all anymore. So I'm going to pick on two. One of them, academia.edu reminds me approximately once a month how uncool I am by sending me this sweet email. In either my defense or theirs, I'm not sure which one, I only have uploaded one PDF to their website a really long time ago, so it's not like I could have any other most popular paper, but one profile view and 2 document views. I get this email anytime one single person searches. They also do the one where they go, someone just searched for you on the internet, click to see what country they're from. They send those emails all the time.
I actually get more than that on ResearchGate, and I'm not even a scientist.
Bloody hell, research.
Well, you guys are going to love the next slide then. Which also, if you're counting, you're like, oh good, that means we're safe. Because there's only 2 slides. I'm not sure my goal is to build a popularity network on ResearchGate. The access to PDFs on there is amazing, but if they're trying to just be a social network, and again, use PDFs as their currency, you have this really strange, small amount of social interaction and small amount of content, which leads to really awkward experiences like stalking your really good friend on the internet through a science social media site. So I should also point out, so that, to be fair, I love the way that they are able to make people, give people access to papers that otherwise you can't get to, especially in the world of tropical island biology. We find a ton of the stuff we're trying to get to through ResearchGate.
But you still need an institutional log-on to access it. So
Say-
no one else there will be able to actually access ResearchGate. You could have a .at.uk account, otherwise it doesn't work.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
so if you signed up a certain while ago.
These are the nuances. I told you guys there would be nuances of the landscape that I didn't know. Oh, so here we go. This is to sort of wrap it all up. So as compared to building awkward social interaction around PDFs, I think we should ask ourselves then, as we're building the next layer of tools for science communication, are we doing great things? There's this amazing article in TechCrunch. It's a short article by Justin Rosenstein, who I think, he co-founded Asana, the productivity software. And he wrote about how in the tech startup world, and the alligators have consumed most of them. I wish the PDF was also pixelated more so that it looked more convincing. So there were, I showed you guys 4, but I turned this into 5 points because I think it's an important distinction. Did the research sink? You were trying to move it from scientist into society and make something change. Did your PDF sink and fall because it was the 24-hour news cycle and that was the only way you could talk about it? Or did the world of science denial chew it up directly after with a well-funded campaign to deny what you had just studied for 5 years? Did hype from the press office or from yourself, or hype from other journalists in the world and in all sorts of different forms of bad translation, did that eat the PDF? Did it just land behind a painful paywall? And I don't mean painful in terms of price, but painful in terms of like, we need to use that person on an island or intern at a senator's office? Or did it just sort of sink back into a digital ivory tower of some sort, either in terms of the chatter just among scientists, or did it sink into a scientist-only social media web where certainly the public is not going to find it? Insane, it's booming, it's exploding to the point where you can't read any of the text on the slide, which I think is fantastic. This is from Jeroen Bosman and Bianca Kramer in the Netherlands. I particularly like seeing the little outreach boom, and I hope that something like altmetric goes into the world of outreach and starts talking about which science is really important and good, says the scientists. And I love the publication boom too, because it means we can try newer and crazier things, and it means scientists themselves can funnel more of their key, important for the public kind of science out into the platforms that are going to get the most attention and access. Oh, and then baby corals are growing. There's some optimism in the ocean as well. I was literally surprised by what slide was next, which doesn't make any sense. I knew which slide was next. My friends. Like seeing them, it's been days. These are both threatened species, according to the US Endangered Species List, and these are both growing on a pier and a sunken block of concrete right in front of our research station. This one is probably 2 years old, and this one's probably 4. And this one on the right here it's on a pier that all the local kids swim off of, so this endangered coral species has basically turned into like a swim step for the kids to get out of the ocean. You know something may be going in a good direction when you have an endangered species that has decided to live in such an absurd place that it's getting stepped on by kids who are going swimming. To me, that's not sad, that's a good sign that stuff is going okay. So my charge to you guys in whatever part of science publishing and communication you are in is to think about the places you can push and shove and do great things. Because there's a lot of PDFs and they don't swim on their own. Although they do seem to be water resistant, turns out. So let's do Q&A and drink some beers. And I'll also point out that lots of different people helped with different ideas and opportunities to ramble in this little side project of mine. So thanks very much.